Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm bringing you a new video, continuing the story of Hùng and Hoài. It's a story that seems simple on the surface, yet beneath it lie events that are growing more complicated with each passing day. The fact that Hoang's mother has become entangled in debts to loan sharks is no longer a small matter. It is quietly setting off a chain of unpredictable consequences. Please join me in today's video to better understand what unfolds next in this story. It had been a long time since Duc last had the chance to visit his grandparents. Though he had only been away from home for a week, to them it felt like an entire month. Every day, they would look toward the gate, hoping to catch sight of their familiar little grandson. The moment Duc stepped into the yard, laughter and chatter instantly filled the house, warming a space that had once felt so quiet and still. The grandparents cherished their grandson not for the gifts he brought, but because his presence filled the loneliness that often comes with old age. Every meal, every story, every gentle handhold carried the longing that had built up over days of separation. To them, simply having him by their side made half of their weariness fade away. Hoang stood watching his son run and laugh happily with his grandparents, a feeling difficult to put into words rising within him. It was the warmth of seeing his child loved so completely, mixed with a lingering worry he could not shake off. He knew these peaceful moments would not always last. Perhaps these were the rare days when Duc could truly live his childhood, untouched by the burdens of the adult world. For that reason, he decided to let Duc stay a few more days. Not because he didn't miss his son, but because he wanted to make up for the things he and his wife had unintentionally taken away over the years. He wanted his child to spend a little more time with his grandparents, listening to old stories, enjoying simple home-cooked meals, and fully feeling a kind of love that nothing could ever replace. Yet deep in Hoang's eyes, worry quietly remained. A worry he dared not speak of or share, silently weighing on his heart. Back at home, Hoài continued her familiar daily routine. Every morning, she went out to the garden early, harvesting vegetables and tending to each flower bed as if it were second nature. The small garden was not only a source of livelihood, but also a place that helped her keep her mind calm amid the many troubles waiting ahead. On the surface, everything seemed peaceful as usual. The plants were still green, the flowers still blooming, and meals were still modest but sufficient within the couple's means. Yet only Hoài and Hoang truly understood how fragile that peace was. It felt like the calm before a storm, appearing tranquil, but hiding deep uncertainty beneath. Neither of them spoke about it, but they shared the same unspoken feeling: the days ahead would not be easy. The problems surrounding Hoang's mother's debt were still hanging over them, with no clear way out. And no matter how hard they tried to keep their family safe and peaceful, those looming storms were quietly drawing closer. Somewhere, unseen, troubles were slowly taking shape. And just when everyone still believed they could hold on a little longer, unpredictable events began to unfold. Hoang's mother had borrowed money from a loan shark group a long time ago. Back then, everything began quietly and seemed not too serious. It was only a few tens of millions of dong, an amount she believed she could manage by working a little harder, saving bit by bit, and gradually asking her children for help. At that time, she didn't think far ahead. Nor did she dare to think too much. Because in desperate circumstances, people often only see the road in front of them, not the deep pit waiting behind. She believed that if she just tried a little longer, everything would eventually be fine. But she never anticipated that what she'd borrowed was not just money, but a heavy vortex. The more she struggled, the deeper she sank. As time passed, interest began to pile upon interest. Day by day, the debt quietly grew without her even realizing it. From a few tens of millions, it doubled, then tripled, until one day she suddenly realized the amount was nearing 100 million dong, a figure far beyond her current means. Every time she thought about the debt, her heart felt unbearably heavy. Sleepless nights became more frequent, and even breathing felt harder. Sometimes, just hearing a motorbike stop at the gate or footsteps outside the alley was enough to make her panic, her legs going weak. She knew all too well that with her strength and situation, this burden was almost beyond what she could endure. She had made an agreement with the debt collectors: 3 days. 3 days to find a way. 3 days to save herself. Those 3 days felt like an entire month to her. Each passing day was heavy and tense. She scraped together every possible coin, borrowed wherever she could, yet the amount she gathered was still far too little. Day after day went by, and the money was still not enough. What she had in her hands was like a drop in the ocean, unable to ease the increasingly harsh pressure from the debt collectors. Her house doors gradually stayed shut all day long. She no longer dared to leave them open as before, nor did she dare sit on the porch enjoying the afternoon breeze like she used to. The house, once the safest place, had now become a place of hiding. Every small sound made her flinch, her heart pounding in fear that they might come at any moment. The debt collectors did not leave her in peace. They constantly came looking for her, sometimes appearing right at her doorstep, other times calling relentlessly. The non-stop calls and cold, curt words slowly crushed her spirit. She understood clearly that hiding was only a temporary solution. The more she avoided them, the worse everything would become. Unable to hide any longer, she finally agreed to meet them at the old meeting place, the very spot where they had once handed her the money. It was a place that had once made her believe she was simply borrowing money during a difficult time, but now it was tied to the greatest fear of her life. In her heart, there was only one wish: to ask for a few more days, just a little more time. She walked there with a heavy heart. Each step felt as if it were being dragged back by worry and unease. Though she kept telling herself to stay calm, her body trembled uncontrollably. She knew this meeting could decide everything. At the meeting place, the atmosphere quickly grew tense. At first, there were rapid-fire questions, then accusations, followed by loud shouts filled with pressure. The exchange became increasingly heated. She grew more and more flustered, unable to say anything beyond the same pleas she had repeated countless times. She lowered her head, her voice shaking, begging them for more time. She said her son was trying desperately to raise money for her, that she only needed a few more days. Every word carried her last fragile hope. But to the debt collectors, such promises had become all too familiar. They had heard them too many times to believe any of it anymore. They demanded that she call her son on the spot. Flustered, her trembling hands held the phone, but she couldn't prove what they wanted to see. In that moment, their patience seemed to run out. Their eyes grew harsher, their voices changed, heavier and far more frightening. She began to panic. In her desperation, she cried out for help, hoping someone might hear, that someone might appear. But the surroundings were terrifyingly silent. Not a single person. Not a single sound in response. That silence made her realize she was completely alone. Her pleas no longer had any effect. The debt collector became violent, no longer hiding his brutality. In a brief moment, he struck her, knocking her unconscious. Everything before her eyes went dark, and her awareness slowly slipped away. In her haze, she was dragged away from the meeting place. No one witnessed it. No one knew what had just happened. All that remained was an empty space, the spot where just minutes earlier she had been standing, head bowed, begging in despair. And from that moment on, no one knew where she had been taken, nor did anyone realize that this incident would become a turning point, forever changing the lives of those left behind. Meanwhile, Hung was still running everywhere to borrow money, completely unaware that somewhere out there, his mother was facing grave danger. In those days, he barely had a moment to rest. He left early and returned late, knocking on one door after another, calling one person and then the next. Even relationships that had grown distant over time, he swallowed his pride and asked for help, hoping only to gather enough money to save his mother. Friends and relatives helped as much as they could. Those struggling themselves could only give a little, while those more comfortable gave more. Not because they were wealthy, but because they trusted Hung. They trusted his reputation and his character, a man who lived honestly, who had never broken a promise or cheated anyone out of money. That trust made him both grateful and burdened, because he knew every bill in his hands carried someone else's faith in him. In the end, after days of exhausting effort, he managed to gather 80 million dong. When he counted the money again, his heartbeat slowed just a little. It wasn't enough to pay everything off, but at least it was an amount he could negotiate with. His heart felt slightly lighter, as if a heavy stone that had pressed on him for so long had finally been lifted, if only a bit. All he wanted was to see his mother as soon as possible. He just wanted to hand the money to her himself, then stand beside her to face the debt collectors together, and finally put an end to the endless days of fear. In his mind, no matter how difficult things were, as long as his mother and family were still there would always be a way to resolve it. He never imagined that while he was frantically scraping together every last bit of money, his mother was already in danger, completely unknown to him. Back at home, Hoài Ca kept to her familiar routine. She mixed mortar and carefully poured it into each flower pot in the yard. Her hands worked steadily, but her mind was never at ease. Quietly, she listened as her husband talked about the money he had just borrowed, the people who had helped them, and the plans ahead. Hoài Ca did not complain. Nor did she blame her husband even once. She understood that Hung had done everything he could within his ability. Seeing his exhausted posture and hollowed face, she couldn't bring herself to say anything harsh. Instead, she chose to listen in silence, allowing him to release some of the worries weighing heavily on his heart. After a while, when Hung finished speaking, Hoài Ca finally spoke gently. Her voice was not loud or sharp, but calm and clear. You should stay with Mom and go with her when she pays the debt. We need to know exactly how much they're demanding, what's principal, what's interest. We can't just hand over the money and leave it at that. Her words carried no reproach, only sincere concern. Hoài Ca understood that if they didn't get everything clear, if they kept paying in the dark, this debt would never truly end. Today it would be paid, tomorrow it would grow again. And little by little, their family would be dragged deeper and deeper down. Her words left Hung silent. He stood there, thinking for a long time. Everything she said was absolutely right, but in his desperation, he hadn't thought it through. All he had wanted was to get the money to his mother as quickly as possible, forgetting that without a final resolution, all his efforts would only be temporary. He realized that he could no longer stand aside. He couldn't leave his mother to face those dangerous people alone. He couldn't just hand over money and turn his back, hoping everything would somehow work out. If the principal and interest weren't clearly settled, if it wasn't resolved once and for all, this debt would continue to haunt his family, bringing unpredictable consequences. Hung let out a long sigh, a deep unease rising within him. A vague premonition made him feel unsettled, though he didn't know that this unease was coming from a truth far more frightening than he could imagine. Somewhere, his mother was no longer at the place where she had arranged to meet. And the real tragedy, at this moment, was only just beginning. After many sleepless nights of thinking, the couple finally agreed to let Duc stay with his grandparents for a few more days. This decision did not come from indifference or an attempt to shift responsibility, but from careful consideration at a time when both of them were weighed down by overwhelming pressure. They understood that, for now, the most important thing was for their child to be somewhere safe, somewhere filled with love and protection. For Duc, staying with his grandparents did not feel unfamiliar. He had long grown used to his parents being busy, used to spending time on his own, learning to understand, and waiting quietly. Perhaps that was why Duc had grown up more mature than his age would suggest. He didn't complain, didn't demand, and didn't ask many questions. He simply listened, quietly doing what he could so as not to become a burden on the adults around him. Though he lacked the full care of his parents, Duc was diligent and thoughtful. He helped his grandparents with small chores around the house, sweeping the yard, watering plants, picking vegetables each afternoon. These simple actions often tugged at the hearts of the adults. At his age, he should have been carefree, playing without worries, not learning to understand the concerns of others. Watching his son like this, Hung felt both heartbroken and full of self-blame. He knew that his child's obedience was the result of the shortcomings he and his wife had brought upon him. Yet in this difficult moment, it was also his greatest comfort. At the very least, he knew his son was growing up kind-hearted, surrounded by his grandparents' love, and not yet swept away by the storms of the adult world. The afternoon passed quietly. Dinner was prepared in a familiar silence. The atmosphere in the house was not heavy, but neither was it cheerful as before. Everyone ate more slowly, thought more deeply, and spoke less. There were things everyone understood, yet no one wanted to mention, because saying them aloud would only make the heart feel more tangled. Outside, the sun was still harsh. Its light shone over the small yard, where neatly arranged flower pots waited to be watered. Life continued on, regardless of worries, regardless of the troubles closing in on people. Flowers still needed water to survive, the soil still needed tending, and tomorrow would still come, no matter how unsteady the human heart might feel. As Hoài Ca cleared the table, she quietly looked out toward the yard. Her mind was filled with thoughts, but she said nothing. She knew that complaints would not help at this moment. All she could do was keep their small home from falling into chaos, so that her husband and child would still have a place to return to. Hung sat there, holding his bowl of rice, his heart heavy. The money he had just borrowed was still there, yet the sense of unease had not faded. He only hoped that once everything had passed, his family would still have the strength to stand up again. He didn't wish for wealth or abundance, only for ordinary days, free from constant fear, free from running away or bowing to anyone. The storm of debt would eventually pass, sooner or later. But what frightened people most was not just the money that had to be repaid, but what it could take away along the way. Loan sharks don't only take money, they can take away a family's peace, its trust, its dignity, and sometimes even human lives. This story is a warning. A small mistake, a hasty decision, can lead to consequences no one could foresee. Yet amid those mistakes, if people still have family by their side, enough clarity to recognize their limits, and enough love not to let go of one another, then there is always a path to turn back. That path may be difficult and slow, but it is the only one that leads people back to true peace. And sometimes, simply having a place to return to, a quiet but warm family meal, is already the most precious thing during stormy days. The story of Hoài Ca and Hung is not yet over. Many challenges still await them ahead. Each decision to come will be a turning point, not only for them, but also for the child who is growing up quietly, enduring in silence. If you want to know what happens next, please subscribe to the channel to watch the next episode. Don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts and feelings below, because every opinion you share helps make this story more complete.
Chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. quá mọi người ạ.